I went to my friend's house that evening thinking it would be simple, just another casual visit where we would study, talk, waste time, maybe order food the way we always did. I knocked on the door, expecting him to open it immediately the way he usually did, but instead there was a pause, a shuffle of steps, and then the door opened slowly. His father stood there, wearing the same calm expression he always had, the kind that made it hard to read what he was really thinking. He greeted me politely, almost warmly, and gestured for me to come inside. The house felt unusually quiet. My friend wasn't home yet. He had texted that he was running a little late and told me to go in anyway. I sat on the sofa, trying not to think too hard about the silence that wrapped around the living room. His father moved around casually, almost too casually, like he was trying to make the environment feel normal. But I could sense something different, an energy I hadn't felt before. Maybe it was the solitude, or maybe it was the way he kept glancing at me with eyes that looked like they carried more thoughts than he could ever say out loud. He asked if I wanted water, and I said yes. While I waited, I glanced around the room. Framed memories hung on the walls, family photos, vacations, his son's achievements. It felt strange sitting there alone, knowing I should have felt comfortable but instead felt a subtle tension I couldn't name. When he returned and handed me the glass, our fingers brushed for a second. It was nothing, an accident, but something inside me shifted. It reminded me that lately, even small touches had started affecting me more than they should. My relationship had been complicated for weeks, messages getting shorter, calls becoming rarer, arguments turning into silence. Part of me had been craving connection, understanding, something that would make me feel seen instead of overlooked. And maybe that's why I noticed the way his father spoke to me, the way he asked if I'd eaten, how my day had been, and how his tone carried a depth I hadn't heard from anyone in a while. He sat across from me at first, making light conversation, asking about college and life. But then he shifted his seat slightly closer, not enough to seem strange but enough for me to feel the air change. I tried to focus on my phone every now and then, pretending I didn't feel it, pretending my heartbeat wasn't growing louder in my own ears. After a few minutes, he said he wanted to show me something, a repair project he'd been working on. He told me it was in the other room, the one at the end of the hallway. I hesitated, not because I feared anything but because I wasn't sure why his request made my chest feel tight. Still, I followed, hearing the soft thud of our footsteps on the wooden floor. Inside the room, there wasn't much to look at. A half-fixed wooden shelf, a few tools scattered on a table, a chair pushed slightly off-center. But the room felt small, too small, and the door almost felt like it closed by itself even though I knew he had pushed it lightly. He explained the project, pointing at something, talking in a tone that was genuinely calm, but my thoughts drifted. The way he stood close, the way his voice softened when he spoke directly to me, the way his presence filled the room, it was all becoming too noticeable. I told myself I was imagining everything, that I was reading into gestures that meant nothing. But the truth was that I had been emotionally vulnerable for weeks, and every small bit of attention felt amplified. I didn't want to admit that some part of me liked it, liked being noticed, liked feeling like someone cared enough to give me their full attention even if it was wrong, even if it was dangerous. He asked if I was okay. The question was simple, but the way he asked made it feel personal. I nodded, even though my voice felt stuck in my throat. His eyes lingered on me for a second longer than they should have, long enough for me to feel my stomach twist in confusion and guilt. My friend's house had never felt like a place where I needed to be careful. But that evening, in that quiet room with its half-fixed shelf and closed door, I understood that something had shifted. I wasn't sure if it was him, or me, or both of us silently drifting into a space we shouldn't be entering. But I felt it, warm, unsettling, forbidden. And I knew this wasn't the end of it. The room felt smaller the longer we stayed inside it, as if the quietness in the air had thickened and wrapped itself around us. I tried to focus on the half-fixed wooden shelf he was explaining, but my thoughts kept drifting somewhere else, somewhere they shouldn't have gone. He spoke softly, thoughtfully, his voice steady, and every now and then he would pause to look at me as if checking whether I was really listening or whether something else was pulling my attention away. He probably sensed it. I wasn't the best at hiding what I felt, even on the days I desperately wanted to. He leaned closer to point at something on the shelf, and for a moment his shoulder almost brushed mine. I stepped slightly back, not to reject the closeness but because the tension made my heartbeat feel too loud. He didn't react, he only offered a faint smile, the kind people give when they understand more than you intend to reveal. You seem distracted, he said, his voice low but not accusing. Is everything all right with you? The question caught me off guard. Not because it was unexpected, but because someone asking sincerely was something I hadn't experienced in a while. I nodded, but he didn't look convinced. He waited, giving me space to speak if I wanted to. I didn't. Talking about my relationship felt too heavy. Admitting I felt unseen, misunderstood, emotionally starved, it felt embarrassing, as if saying it out loud would make the truth too real to ignore. But he didn't push. Instead, he stepped back a little and picked up one of the tools, turning it in his hands as though giving me time to gather myself. The quietness stretched between us, not uncomfortable but charged with something neither of us could name. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted. Softer, more careful. You know, sometimes people carry more inside them than they let others notice. Sometimes they just need someone to listen. I looked at him, surprised by how accurately his words struck me. It felt like he was talking directly to the part of me that had been breaking quietly, slowly, unnoticed by the person who was supposed to understand me the most. I didn't respond, but he saw it in my eyes anyway. Something flickered there, maybe concern, maybe curiosity, maybe something else entirely. He took a small step closer, not invading my space but shortening the distance between us. If you ever need to talk, he murmured, you can. I'm not saying you should. Just that you can. Quote, there was no romantic intention in the words themselves, but the way they were delivered carried a warmth my heart immediately clung to. I felt guilty for even appreciating it. Guilty because part of me knew this was crossing a line, not physically, but emotionally. And emotional lines were sometimes more dangerous. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, maybe a thanks, maybe a reassurance, but before I could, he reached out to adjust the collar of my shirt. The touch was brief, barely more than a gentle brush, but it sent a wave of tension through the room. My breath caught for a second. He froze too, as if realizing instantly what that gesture meant in a space already filled with unspoken feelings. He pulled his hand back slowly. Sorry, he muttered, looking away. It was crooked. It's okay, I said quickly, though my voice sounded different, quieter, uncertain, almost too aware of the moment that had just happened. Before either of us could speak again, the front door opened. Footsteps echoed through the hallway. My friend was finally home. The sound snapped everything back into place, the tension, the closeness, the warmth, all of it scattered in an instant. He stepped away from me, his expression settling into something neutral, almost practiced. The door to the room opened, and my friend appeared, apologizing for being late. I forced a smile, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. His father greeted him casually, his voice even, his stance relaxed. It was like watching a curtain drop over a scene that just moments ago had been too intense to name. But when I glanced at him one last time, I saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, something unresolved, something he was trying hard to hide. And I knew I was hiding the exact same thing. As we walked out of the room, the air between us carried the weight of everything unspoken, everything almost said, everything almost felt. I tried to shake it off, to pretend the moment had been nothing more than awkward timing or misunderstood kindness, but deep down I knew better. Something had shifted, something real, something dangerous, and I had no idea what to do with it. The ride home felt longer than it usually did, even though the streets were quiet and the evening wind pressed softly against the car windows. My friend talked about random things, an assignment due next week, a movie he wanted to watch, a joke someone had made in class, but his words drifted around me like background noise. I kept nodding at the right moments, forcing small responses, trying hard to act normal even though my thoughts were tangled somewhere else entirely. Every time I blinked, I saw the same room again. The quietness, the closeness, the touch that wasn't supposed to matter but somehow did. I tried to tell myself I was overthinking it, that it was all harmless, that I was just reading too deeply into a moment that shouldn't have meant anything. But no matter how many excuses I came up with, none of them settled the growing heaviness inside me. I glanced at my phone several times, half expecting a message from my partner, half hoping for one, half dreading it. There was nothing, and maybe that was the part that stung the most. I wanted him to ask where I was, to care, to notice, but the silence between us had become so normal that even expecting warmth felt unrealistic. When I got home, I told my friend I'd text him later. I needed space to breathe, to think, to untangle everything inside me. The moment I stepped into my room, I sank onto the bed and covered my face with my hands. Everything that happened replayed itself in fragments, not as a single memory but as scattered moments that each carried their own weight. His voice asking if I was okay. His eyes watching me carefully. His hand adjusting my collar. The way he stepped back when he realized what the moment had turned into. The message in his silence. I told myself again that it hadn't crossed any line. But emotionally, the line had blurred, and I was the one who let it happen. Hours passed, and the room fell darker until the only light was the soft glow of my phone on the bedside table. I didn't want to check it, yet I kept glancing at it, searching for a notification that wasn't coming. My partner's silence felt louder than ever. Eventually, I picked up the phone, opened our chat, typed a long message, then deleted it. Typed something shorter, deleted that too. Nothing I wanted to say felt right. Nothing felt enough. Just when I finally gave up and set the phone aside, it buzzed. For a moment, my heart jumped, thinking it was my partner, but the name on the screen stopped me completely. It was his father. I hope you reached home safely. That was all the message said. Simple, polite, innocent, on the surface. But the moment I read it, something inside me tightened. It wasn't the words, it was the timing, the intention behind them, the unspoken thread that lingered between us after I left the house. I stared at the message for a long time, not knowing whether to reply or ignore it. Responding felt like letting the moment continue, like acknowledging that something had happened between us even if no one had said it aloud. Ignoring it felt wrong too, cold, dismissive, ungrateful, maybe even dishonest. Eventually, I typed, "Yes, thanks." That was it. Nothing more. Nothing that revealed anything. But the moment I sent it, guilt washed over me so suddenly it almost made me breathless. It wasn't guilt because of him, it was guilt because I knew I had wanted him to text. I lay back against the pillow, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how everything had become so complicated so quickly. I hadn't planned any of it. I hadn't gone there seeking attention or connection or anything remotely close to the emotional pull I ended up feeling. It just happened. And that was the part that scared me the most. The next morning, things didn't feel any clearer. If anything, the confusion felt heavier. My partner texted me with a casual, "GM, nothing more." No warmth, no curiosity, no sign they sensed anything was wrong. I stared at the message, wondering how two people could be together and still feel miles apart. Maybe that was why I'd been vulnerable yesterday. Maybe that was why his father's concern had struck me so deeply. Maybe that was why that moment in the room had felt bigger than it should have. But I knew one thing, if I let myself drift further, I would cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. So I made a choice. I replied to my partner, telling them we needed to talk. Not to confess about the moment, but to confront the growing emptiness between us. Whatever happened in that quiet room had been a reflection of something broken inside me, something I needed to face, not escape from. As I held the phone, waiting for their response, I realized the truth. Emotional infidelity didn't start with actions. It started with silence, with loneliness, with unspoken needs. And yesterday, I had wandered dangerously close to a place I couldn't afford to return to.